It is a given that certain personal factors play a large role in people's mobility decisions. The relatively stable factors can best be described as characteristics. These characteristics determine how you choose to get around. For example, your characteristics dictated why you drove to school or took a bus today. Some common characteristics include income, age, disability, and gender. To understand how these characteristics dictate your transit patterns, we now turn to two twins, Rich and Gertrude.
When Rich pursued higher education, he chose an urban university with a walkable campus, allowing him to walk for most of his trips. Soon, Rich graduated and landed himself a high-paying job. Rich's new coworkers all drive, peer pressuring him into thinking he needs a car too, so he starts driving to work but still walks for other trips. Rich then has a kid and leaves the city for a suburb. He now uses his car for all trips. Unfortunately, Rich is in a crash which permanently disables him. He can no longer commute to work, causing him to lose his job. Furthermore, there are no accessible transit options in and out of the suburbs which would allow a disabled person to maintain their independence. Before he became disabled, Rich's lifestyle and trip habits planted a seed in his son, who will now be more likely to default to using a car in the future. When could planning intervene to make the story go differently? Rich could have been incentivized to remain in his urban environment, or accessible transit could be made more widely available to allow Rich to continue contributing to society the way he wanted to. For Rich's son, the car-dependent seed could be replaced by cycling education or mandatory school busing, or it could have been totally avoided if Rich had remained in a walkable city. But what about someone who may not have the same freedom for choices to begin with? How would a disadvantaged person be influenced by their characteristics?
Enter Gertrude, a recent high school graduate who gets pregnant with a daughter and becomes a full-time mother. She lives in a semi-walkable area with a decent public transit system. Unlike her male partner, she does the majority of non-commuting trips. Eventually, Gertrude decides to move out of her parents' house in the suburbs to a low-rent neighborhood of a nearby city. The neighborhood is more walkable, and as Gertrude cannot afford a car, she walks slightly more to complete her errands. As her child grows, they get used to taking public transit, but monthly passes are expensive. Gertrude's gender makes her more susceptible to harassment while taking transit, which disincentivizes her from using it. However, her low income inclines her to walk or to take transit, making her a captive user with few alternatives. Eventually, her child will grow up and move away, but the kid's characteristics have been bent towards active and urban transit. The seed has been planted. However, their transit use will slowly decrease over the next decades until it plateaus when they are middle-aged. Meanwhile, with her child gone, Gertrude will begin to age and face mobility problems. She has to take transit more often, but due to her fear, she logs substantially fewer trips overall. With Gertrude's story in mind, planning interventions could include making transit safer for unaccompanied women and free transit for students.
We see with both Rich and Gertrude there are essential parts to each person that create unique problems that need specific plans or action to ameliorate. Our two examples also exhibit the power of the seed effect on children and adults, while we also gave some planning approaches that can better address both Gertrude or Rich's specific problems stemming from income, age, disability, or gender.